Hi, my name's John, and I just want to introduce you to the video that we're going to do. We're going to be making colour wash and line drawings, but first I want to introduce you why we're doing this project. So throughout history, people have connected with art and creativity as a means of keeping a connection with their humanity, health and well-being during the most difficult of times. Our world has changed, and as we're tentatively emerging from some isolation, we've begun to see physical reminders of this in our communities, in our homes and on our streets, such as the signs which say keep your distance, reminders to wear face masks, black and yellow warning tape and printed footprints in our supermarkets and schools, and we've even made rainbows thanking our NHS and so on. There is an abjectness about this pandemic, yet there's still delight to be found. People are reconnecting and seeing one another. Businesses and shops are gradually reopening. Streets are emerging into the life they once knew. As an artist, I've researched how art has been used as a way of survival in an effort to make the worst of times the best of times, through the mental and physical activity of creating and making. Art always creates new normals. I'd like you to join me in an art project through documenting these times in our streets, through snapshot photography and painting as a means of bringing joy into the story in a simple form, yet including the small reminders of the imposition which this cruel disease has brought upon us. We're going to make simple, innocent ink and colour wash paintings, punctuated with the signs of how slightly differently we now navigate our world in 2020. Hopefully you'll find the process to be cathartic and uplifting, making a map of the new history of which we're all now a part. Using the photographs supplied, or you may wish to explore your own communities and make drawings of the shop fronts and include the signs which appear in the doorways and windows. In this video, I'll demonstrate how to do this and then to paint it using watercolour paints. Hope you find the learning enjoyable, and it includes this introduction to the workshop. There's going to be descriptions of the media you'll need. The resources and photographs and examples are in the links below, and there'll be also pre-drawn images that you can download if you're not so confident with drawing. And the video tutorial will also introduce you to different ways of seeing and then getting your drawing better, and the different processes and techniques of painting that are involved. Thanks ever so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy it. Hi, so we're just going to begin the next session, which is just a bit about materials. The first thing obviously we'll need is paper, and there's different sorts of paper you can use. There's sketchbook paper, which is a cartridge paper, but just general for sketching. We'll use that to start with, and we'll also be needing a sort of a watercolour paper, or any sort of thick paper that you've got will do. The problem is that the thinner it is, it becomes a little bit more ruckly and cockly, and the water doesn't absorb into the papers as well. So the thicker the paper you've got, the better. Pencils, the sorts of things you'll need are just normal pencils, HB, 2B. HB is the normal general pencil that you'll get, but you also get softer pencils, which are 2B, and you get harder pencils, which are called H. The B stands for black. You can also get propelling pencils. Now these are particularly good as it'll help you just isolate lines, and they're quite thin, and what we want to be doing is drawing straight lines. Incidentally, if you're not so confident at drawing straight lines, then I have got other videos. Just follow my channel. If you Google Hello Art John Sutcliffe, then you'll find all the videos there. Just dealing with all sorts of different things. I've got perspective drawing, which we'll cover in this episode a little bit, and also just general hatching techniques that we'll also cover. So have a look at those. John Sutcliffe, Hello Art, and you'll find them there. If you get a bit more of a struggle with that, then my website is johnsutcliffeart.com, and that shows all the different sorts of artwork that I do. Be great to have you there. The next thing that we obviously need are pens, and the pens that we're going to use are the fine line pens that you can make different marks with, but they are either non-water resistant, or this type, which are a much more what we call archival and fine point and quite accurate, and that they won't, once they're dry, they won't smudge when we get them wet. So these are ones that are quite useful. These ones are quite useful for ink and colour wash, but these and these as well. It's just a matter of what you've got. So just have a go with those. So the other types of paints I like to use are the pan type watercolours or the tube type watercolours, and obviously there's a difference. These they both last very well. These have lasted me years actually. Tubes will run out because you tend to squeeze out a little bit more than you actually need, but they're good for mixing good quantities of paint. The pan ones are a bit less than that. The next thing we need to think about are the colours that we'll need. Now the colours, just up to you really, but I like to use a couple of yellows. This is lemon yellow and cadmium yellow. A red, which is what we call a cadmium red, and a crimson, and a blue, a cool blue and a warm blue. There's ultramarine blue, Windsor blue, they're good. You can use the greens. The browns are particularly important. I like to use yellow ochre and burnt umber and burnt sienna in the paintings that I do. There's also another brilliant colour called quinacridone yellow, which is a beautiful golden colour for making gorgeous skies. That's a good thing to do. And so the next thing that we'll need are brushes. Now I'm going to put all these on screen as well, but there's a whole variety of brushes. When it comes to brushes, what do you do? Because there's so many to look at. Well, the basic brushes are round, and they're either synthetic or natural hair, sometimes called sable. The sable ones are a little bit more expensive, but they do come to a finer point. The synthetic ones tend to last quite a lot, and they'll take a lot of action. And they will go down to quite a fine point, and they can be quite big, quite a fine point. But you'll never find that you can get a really crisp point with that. So what we're going to look at, I'll just put a piece of paper behind so you can see that, is also the use of a thing called a rigger brush, which is quite a long haired brush, this sort of thing, and that's beautiful for painting lines. Making they're called rigger brushes because they're used to paint the rigging of ships and things. You get special brushes which are like dagger brushes, which are really good for lines and for doing broad strokes. And there are these clipped brushes as well, which are good for doing sort of hairy types of things. You find that the tips of those are it's not even the spaced out. You get fan brushes, which are good for blending, and then you get the square-ended brushes. I love to use these. These are great for laying in washes. This is what we call a half inch, 1.5 inch brush, 3/8. I think that's a 1 inch, and you can go at 2 inches, 3 inches, just for laying in gorgeous big washes. You'd use tube paint for that sort of thing. And there are also Japanese brushes, which are again very similar to the round brushes, but they're very light haired. These are synthetic ones, but you can just trail those across the paper, and that will make a gorgeous brush stroke as well. But the reason that these brushes are soft haired is it's all about where they hold the water. And a sable brush will hold a lot of water. They've got like fine serrations in the sides of the hairs, the natural hair ones, and that will tend to hold a volume of water which will let your brush flow much more evenly, and let you load your brush once every now and again rather than having to quick dab all the time. You can also get, and these are brilliant actually. These have got a little ink tank in them, and they usually the points of the brush stay very well. Just a water tank brush, and they're quite cheap. And the water I'll just show you this. I've got some water. You can see some water in there at the moment. I'll just squeeze a bit out. So it'll come out at the moment. Hopefully. If I have a bit of water. Oh, there we go. The water just squeezes out, so you can make your marks nice and easily with that. That's the little section on brushes, and the next section is just a little bit about the source photographs that you'll use. Now, I've talked about going out and photographing your local community. I went out into Chesterfield last week and took a number of photographs of the shops there, of the people that are there. So I went out into Chesterfield last week and took a lot of shots, and what I was interested in was the signs that are in the shops. I'm interested in taking a square on view of the shop wherever it is, and taking a view that is directly opposite. Find that on this picture here, my camera's tilted slightly, and so we get an angle going up. What we want to do is make a painting that's the square on the front, but that is adequate enough. I wanted to see if it's possible to do like 3 shops in a row. So I've got number 3. I've got this shot of the 2 stores on Vicar Lane, and then the Wilko's, and I haven't got all the rest of the Wilko store in there, and so I took them going a little bit further. So it gives me all the information I need to create a painting. It might be quite a long painting, this one, but you'll find that as you get into it, even though it looks quite maybe uninteresting, the artist's job is actually to look and see, right, what is interesting about this particular thing. I'm suggesting that we look at the just the little changes that have been made due to COVID, and the signs that appear in shops. You may see people walking with masks. They might appear in the photographs as well. What I mean by the signs that appear is this sort of thing where they keep your distance signs. We've got people walking around with masks. We've got yellow tape on the road, and we've got the barriers as well in the market. Also the little signs. People get used to it. It's really good. People are used to it now, and but it's just reminding us to keep that little bit more care and attention as we go along. So I took quite a lot of photographs. You can access these. You can download them from johnsutcliffeart.com education. It's all in the description below, and you'll be able to use these photographs to make your own paintings. If you don't want to do the COVID thing, that's up to you. But that's what they're mainly focused on. Now, like I said, there are actually 2 different sorts of photographs. One where it shows the perspective. So this is where the things are bigger in the foreground, and the things get smaller in the distance, and you'll find that the lines converge. If you're not sure about perspective drawing, then again on my Hello Art videos, Hello Art John Sutcliffe, you'll be able to find those instructional videos on perspective drawing, which is and it comes in a number of stages. So just Google that and maybe put Hello Art John Sutcliffe perspective drawing, and you'll find that. I've also put that in the link below. So you get the perspective drawings, or you get the photographs that are what we call square on, rather like the one that I showed you from the crown slots here. That's square on. This one of Wilko's is a perspective, but we can turn that so it doesn't look as though it's in perspective.
So now we come to making small sketches of the photos. So paper and pencil, and looking at the photographs, make some small thumbnail frames, and from within that just start to begin to check out for details and for shapes, anything that you see, and try to make them so that they become a picture of the light and the dark of the areas. So we're getting basically what's in the image, and then we begin to shade the darker areas, the lighter areas. There's no need for detail at this point, but there's just little notes that might help us with our further paintings. We're going to just do a number of sketches from a number of photos, so that then you can select what it is about that image that interests you, and you'll find yourself selecting different areas. They become more important, and the idea is to make drawings which help you choose what you want to paint. It's important that you shade the light and the dark areas, and make a few drawings on one page, and the aim is that you could complete each drawing in less than 10 minutes. Maybe you could do them in a couple of minutes by the end of it, but it's just quite a quick way of getting a sense of what might be in the picture. So at the top here I've put together 2 images to create a drawing for of people and the Wilco area, and then the bottom image I'm just looking at what I've called the crown slots painting, which is the one that I've selected to do. Then I'm going to come and make a final pencil drawing. So using a fine pencil, I'm going to just map out first of all where the centre is, where the sides are, and look carefully for the proportions of each part of the shop and how that might fit on the paper. It's quite important as well that we just look for where we can gauge a proportion. For instance, the height of a door would be the height of a person that's standing in it, so we can just gauge a heights there, and then we can measure lengths from side to side using that same sort of thing. Use your source photos for reference. Lightly draw. I must sort of emphasize that you're going to rub this out in the end, so you need to just make sure your drawing's light, you're not going to be pressing on too hard, and looking for the main shapes. When we see this drawing develop, just gradually changing it, just gradually building up what the main shapes are, and then going in a little bit later on we'll be going into detail. How far is the path? How far down does that come? How far might the tree be in front? And you notice that things that are in front tend to be lower down the image. Looking for little curves in the doorway there as that leads into the entrance. And then at the other side, making sure it's the same height. And I'm sort of, as I move my hand across, I'm using that as a way in which I can guide the sizes and shapes. If you make a little error, use a putty rubber is a sort of soft squidgy rubber that's good for taking off the top surface of the pencil. It doesn't, like a plastic eraser, really rubs deep into the paper. So now we're coming on to the ink part of the drawing, and the ink part of the drawing is going to go over the lines that we've already done. Carefully moving your hand, try and slide that across the paper, and make sure that we've got just each of the references. Again, we're gradually building up the shapes to give us our keys to where we're actually drawing. Here I'm just putting a piece of paper underneath my wrist to make sure that it doesn't smudge the actual pencil drawing that's there, because that just causes further problems. So we're just going up, putting little details in, keep looking back at the photo for reference, and then we're going to look at shading. Now shading with one of these pens is done by cross-hatching, which is basically making more than one line in one particular area. So we draw the shape, and then we use straight lines to create some cross-hatching. And here I'm leaving some little areas because I can see some reflections in the windows, and when you go across the other way that makes it darker. So the more lines you put on, the darker it goes. Just be careful not to go over edges too much. This is inside the windows is very dark, and I'm going to use this part of the ink drawing to make sure that I've got those darknesses in. I will also use paint to do that, but in the first instance, getting those real darks in, it does help, particularly if we're beginning doing watercolour. It really does help us to make sure that we've got something that's really dark, because watercolour is the building up of washes of colour, which gradually become darker as you layer them on top of each other. Just working on the tree shapes here. Some of the branches will go in between and out, and you might make a few more up as you go along, because as you build confidence, that also helps to make sure that you've got a cut that there. make sure again that we're gliding our hands across the paper. And I'm not always trying to draw the outlines of a branch. Sometimes if it's a twig it just needs a line, it doesn't really need a thickness. Sometimes I'm pushing the pen, sometimes I'm pulling it and drawing it across the paper. Branches don't always go upwards, sometimes they go down. They'll come towards us. Quite important to draw things that are in front of objects first, and then we can put the objects, when we're doing the inking, to put the objects or the shapes behind them. So if you've already drawn them and you need to draw something underneath, it becomes more of a problem. So we've got to draw the foreground objects first, and then work towards the background. Because this is speeded up, this looks a lot quicker than it actually is, although the shorter strokes are much quicker to make than the longer strokes. Here I'm just trying to build up the light and the shade. I'm trying to build up the tone, so making things darker in an area by using the lines. If you imagine that you're working in this area and you've got so many lines, then you double the amount of lines, then that would make it twice as dark. The lettering is quite important. We want to create a sense that this is a printed sign. However, the hand-drawn look of the picture is also quite important. So it doesn't really matter too much that we're not absolutely accurate with those, but we just want to make sure that they've got a sense of the sign that's there. And now, probably for me the most important part of it is just a reference to the social distancing signpost that's within the doorway of this gaming arcade. So the actual naming of the shop or the place actually gives it a sense of this is a particular place at a particular time. Of course, the names of the shops may change, the businesses may change, the colours of the windows may change, and the colours of the signage on it may change over the years, and then this becomes a part of our history. When it comes to drawing figures, we're just looking for a sense of scale. I've got some videos on getting proportions of human figures, but we're not actually drawing to create characters and to create exactness. We're just trying to draw those in as a reference to the people that move and work and shop within the area. It's nice to have some objects in the foreground as well. These bollards are quite characteristic of Chesterfield. We can also move things around. We don't actually have to draw them in exactly the same position. And here I'm just outlining the figure of the lady there, and just putting in the main shapes of her clothes. And we're not trying to get eyes and nose and mouth and ears and all that sort of thing. We just want to give a sense of, we've got a couple of children being looked after by, I assume as the grandparents, and just sitting on a nice lunch on the bench. Now the lighting within the shop window here is quite interesting because there are some spotlights within it, and so what I've got to try to achieve is a sense of the light going onto the signage inside the window, but keeping it very dark at the edges and gradually building up a sense of the spotlight. And these curved areas of glass here could be a little bit of a challenge, but just look for, what you've got to look for is reflection, and because that will then give it the glossiness. So there's quite a high contrast in these curved windows that we'll come on to when we look at the painting. As we work towards the top of the image, I'm not too fussed about it stopping, so it will gradually fade out, and there'll be leaves on the trees which will actually cover up much of the building that's there. So we're just giving a sense of that fading away. Going gradually working in to more detail and to more specific areas. So we've gone from the larger shapes to much more particular sorts of things now, and that would build up over time. So this, obviously, this drawing's taken. This is 5 times the speed what it would have normally taken me. Just putting in little senses of brickwork. Thinking about more shading, more tone, little details. That as you go along with it, you don't notice that all the details all at one point. What we do is we notice details as we go along. We've got to take it in and then map it into the picture, and keep looking at it and seeing it. Now I'm beginning to erase the image because I'm getting more satisfied with it and think it's ready for paint. I don't want to overdo it because I want the colour to begin to work. And again, I'm using a putty rubber. You could use a plastic eraser, but be very gentle with that as you do it. We just want to get rid of most of the surface, the pencil that's underneath the ink. And if we rub too hard, then the paper surface will actually be damaged, and the watercolour won't work so well on it. So now we come into the colour wash, and the rule for this is really make it wet. I've taped around the outside of the picture so that I just don't want the paint to go any further than the edge of the picture, and so there's a lot of water that goes on, and I'm painted in now just all around the brickwork, putting in some water with a little dash of yellow ochre. And put that on the floor as well. So that's going to give me the sense of how the colour will work up. Now I've used yellow ochre because I want that to be to mix with the next colour that I'm going to put on top, which was going to be a crimson, an alizarin crimson, and putting this colour wash all over the image will give us a sense of unity in the picture. Now after it's dried a little, I'm putting in some Payne's grey, which is going to just begin to denote the shadowed areas and some of the darker areas. So that's going underneath windowsills, underneath the door signage. And now, as that paint is still wet, as that water is still wet, I've got this thin wash of alizarin crimson. I'm using a square-ended brush, as you can see, and that would just actually adds to the architecture. It gives you more formal sort of square edges if you use it in that particular way, or if you use it on its thin edge, then you can create quite thin lines. So I'm just using those. If you notice in the palette, I've got the 3 colours, and as that ochre, that first wash is still wet, I'm just dropping in bits of deeper colour and then letting that run and bleed. Watch this as it runs and bleeds into the washes that I've put in, and so that unifies the whole building together. Now the blue I'm mixing here because there's some blue within the window, and want that to go in just to create the sense of blue, but I don't want to use too much because that will stand out quite a lot. It'll be quite warm. It'll make, as you can see there, the colour looks to stand out even more than the colour that I put in the background. So now, going back with a finer brush, put in some more Payne's grey, and just letting that colour run. You see that at the bottom of that door post. The grey just runs in. We don't want it to be even, we want it to be more textured. I'm just putting in, again, going in for shadows and darks. That upper part of the painting, the colour is drying off, and so I'm just putting in some more marks with the crimson, and they went, oops, that's gone too dark there, too red. If you put the colour on too thickly, what can happen is the next time you put a wash on, that will run quite considerably. And so this is, I'm just pulling that paint off by dabbing it onto my piece of kitchen roll and squeezing the brush out and just soaking up some of the colour and water from it. It's very easy to be impatient with this. So just be confident that your colour will build up. Gone for the yellow ochre, so now is an opportune time to just go in for the browny ochre of the trees. I'm putting a bit of blue in with that to deepen that up, to give that shade. Just be sensible about the way in which you choose your brush. Now we're going to go for smaller areas, so I've got more of a fine pointed number 6 brush to put in those details. And so you keep building up the thin washes and develop those darker areas. Once they're dry, you can go over again and you'll see that it just deepens up again, then dry it off again. You could use a hairdryer to do that. Be careful not to let the paint blow everywhere, just dry it carefully, and you'll end up with these magical textures. So as we build up the washes, now you can keep on going for little details, extra shadows, extra areas which make a difference in depth. There I'm just washing out the colour. The main colour of the signage does need to be strengthened, because that's going to be the thing that gives it the character. But we don't deepen that too much, and I have changed it slightly from the photograph to give it a more contrasting look with the blues that are in the background. So I'm bringing it into the orange range. And now I'm going on with a little bit more detail, bits of deeper things. Want to emphasise some of the colour that's in the signage. And the whole idea is to bring a balance of colour across the image. When I finally do the trees, that will bring all those orangey browns will also come into that. But just using, like I said, just use some yellow ochre, some alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and some Payne's grey. This is a rigger brush. This is to give myself a chance to do some lines that have got a thinness to them that's not quite achievable with the round brushes. But we can do lines with just the edge of the square brush. Keep checking shadows, emphasize shadows a little bit more. They're not quite so visible in the painting, but we do get them. Just going back and having a look at that building up of the final colour. Now here we come to the trees and the final part of the painting, where I'm just using now this is a dagger brush, and it's on dryish paper. I've not wet the paper too much here, and I've just got different thicknesses of paint that I can put on, scumbling it about to create that light within the trees. Not going to go paint the whole lot, even though it seems like it is on the photograph. What we see is just light coming through the trees, which is the beauty of this. So where the yellow ochre's wet, I'll dip in a bit of the blue, and maybe tempted to go a little bit darker, just to emphasise some of those shadows a bit more. Spinning my brush around, the dagger really does make a nice impression of those leaves. I'm going to go looking for the particular darknesses that are there. I'm using, actually on this one, I'm using the Windsor blue, the phthalo blue, which just gives it is a bit greenier sort of look to it, and mixes really nicely with the ochre. Just want to join those two trees together. Just now, to give it a little bit more life, what I'm doing is just with the end of the brush, I've got some colour on it, I'm just spattering that around a little bit just to give it some movement in the image, just flicking little bits of dots, spattering it around the outside of the painting. I hope you enjoyed that, and here's the final image. And if you've got any questions or anything that you want to do, then do drop me a line. Then you can go visit me through my website or on the YouTube comments below, and have a good time.